So my name's Mayor Michelle Kafusi. I'm the mayor of Provo, and I am your substitute. Mayor Silverstrini is usually who conducts these meetings, but he is currently unavailable. He's out of town, and so you're stuck with me, so I apologize. But we will push through this agenda, and before I get started, I just wanted to say how much work Cam and his team have been doing all summer long. They have just worked endlessly on trying to get us organized to start this new year. Also including the leadership, President Ramsey and Mayor Silverstrini have been just champs for us out there beating the bushes, trying to get things organized and ready to go so that we have a smooth upcoming legislative session. I say smooth, you know, we're just going to start off with happy thoughts and positive that it's going to be the best session ever and we're going to have great success. Let's just all start thinking that and maybe it'll come true. With that said, I will now turn the microphone over to President Ramsey. She's going to address an upcoming event.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see all of you, and welcome to the 75 of you or so that we have online as well. Nice to see you all. Hey, I just want to give a reminder of the Utah Mayor's Dinner at the Governor's Mansion, Monday, the 22nd of August. It is for every mayor in the state of Utah and a +1. So you can bring a spouse or a friend or whoever with you. It is Monday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. and we're doing tours at the Capitol at 4 if anyone would like a kind of a behind-the-scenes tour. We're asked not to wear heels or dresses if you'd like to go up into above the rotunda, if you'd like to go up into the top. And the dress, it is an important note. And so no heels and no dresses. The dress for the dinner is cowboy casual, and we look forward to joining as mayors across the state of Utah and meeting with the governor and lieutenant governor and having dinner together. The photo in front of the mansion, I believe, is at 6:15, so please try to be there on time because it's a one-time shot for us to take that photograph. So 6:15 for the photo, and we will see you Monday the 22nd. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. And I want to emphasize something that Mayor Ramsey just said about this mayoral event at the mansion. I've been at the league now since 2006, and this is the first time we've ever had this sort of event at the Capitol specifically for mayors. Let me add one other interesting tidbit. I just returned from spending a week with state league directors from across the country, and there are quite a few leagues around the country whose governors won't even meet with local government leaders. I'll spare you their names, but I was blown away. Over a third of the state league directors raised their hand and said our governors won't even meet with us. And yet our governor is rolling out the red carpet, and we have over 100 mayors who've already RSVP'd for the event. And so please make sure your mayors are planning on that event next Monday night.
If they are, they need to make sure they told me.
Yes, and Mayor Ramsey just reminded me that if you have not yet RSVP'd, please make sure you do so to Mike Maurer, or you can contact me and I can connect you with Mike Maurer to make sure we have as many mayors there as possible. Okay, now I have the opportunity to introduce a couple of friends and colleagues from the Department of Workforce Services to provide an update to the LPC about the implementation of House Bill 462 around housing data collection. Before I introduce Christine and Bill, we just finished the League Board meeting earlier this morning, and we received several questions from League Board members about data collection and metrics and how all the pieces were going to fit together. And we said, glad you asked, because at LPC we have Christina Oliver and Bill Kobab coming to talk about the housing database and the implementation. A couple of quick overviews. House Bill 462 from last year, we do have a good story to tell at the local level. The Gardner Policy Institute just released a report last month that showed that we collectively have closed the housing gap in Utah from about 56,000 units 4 years ago to 31,000 units as of July. We've also seen more housing permits. Local governments have issued more housing permits in the last 3 years than any 3-year period of time in state history. So that's all the good news. Bad news is we still have a housing crunch. There's still a lot of political pressure that you're feeling as local government leaders from your constituents, as well as state leaders feeling pressure to try to continue to address the crisis. But we it is critical that as you meet with legislators, you continue to share this data and utilize the data from House Bill 462's data collection. Before I turn with Christine and Bill, let me make this last pitch to you. This is really your chance right now, before the deadline of October 1, to make sure any questions you have about data collection come to Christine and Bill, because we're 6 weeks away from that initial deadline. We've done webinars with them, we've had them at league conferences, but this is really your last big bite at the apple to make sure that any concerns you have about data collection come before them as we're building out the database. So with that as background, Christine Oliver and Bill Kobab, yep, come on up. Microphone is yours. Dehan, are you joining as well? Okay, and Dehan Esich from the Gardner Policy Institute. So the time is now yours. We have 79 people online in addition to the people in the room.
You didn't give us like a bill play.
Oh yeah, sorry, no music for this one.
So, hi, most of you I've had the opportunity to meet. My name is Christina Oliver, and I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development at the Department of Workforce Services. I brought the two smarter people with me to answer a lot of the questions. So Bill is actually the database and the Moderate Income Housing Plan Program Manager. And then, of course, everybody knows Dion. It's difficult not to hear at least one or two sound bites from him during the week. I'm really opening up the floor to any of you. Ask any questions you have. Are there specifics you'd like to know? Do you want Dion to give you a little teaser, the latest housing data? Yes? It's your show.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. So we'll be working on basically accounting what is our gap on the affordable side and moderate side. So we'll be going through a very rigorous process of actually using the data. One of the most difficult aspects of my work is there's census data, then there's real-time data when it comes to housing prices, rents, and incomes. So a big part of this effort is just to use the right data, and then the other part is where you all come in and we work with you to analyze everything. So my big ask from everybody in this room and online is we'll be coming to you with a lot of questions, and please welcome us in as we're asking some of these questions, especially on what do you have for the next 5 to 10 years. So just as Cam mentioned, we cut the housing gap down, but from our household projections at the Gardner Policy Institute, we need roughly another 220,000 more units by the end of the decade. Not by 2060, how far our projections go, but just by the end of the decade across the state. So we still have a lot of work to do. That's kind of the big thing right now.
Yeah, so in particular, HB 462, one of the components of it was to build an affordable housing database. We do hope this will be a nationwide model that others will duplicate. And that is in part what he was talking about. Data pieces that we're going to be looking for are, of course, internal, detached, and attached ADU material, or data, I apologize. Entitlement data. We'll be working with the tax commission. We would really enjoy having up-to-date household makeup and income data to provide for a model where projections will be created so that you don't have arbitrary numbers placed upon the cities, on all municipalities, as the past 3 years you had. If you didn't have a chance to look at the metrics you were being judged on the last 3 years on your moderate income housing plan, there were specific numbers that you were supposed to be meeting. Those numbers were flawed, would be the best way to put it. Hence this effort with the database, so that a truly strategic, mandate, if you would, is made, and you're not all just shooting for arbitrary numbers. This is going to be a very short presentation. Thank you. I'm excited. Any other questions?
So like I said, this is our chance to make sure that any considerations or questions or anything you have for the research team, for the analysis team, and everybody in between, please bring them up now. So Carson, I'm looking to you on the chat room, and then Liam has the microphone in the back for people who have questions. So Councilmember Allen up here in front, Liam. And then who is in the back after that? Mike Winder. Okay.
Jewel Allen from Grattsville City. I was just curious to see if you you've noticed or you will be measuring the impact of the change in federal interest rates, like on housing demand. It just seems like now I'm seeing, just even personally in my neighborhood, house for sale signs being up longer. Anyway, I just wondered if that was a good, it bodes well for affordable housing, or what does that, what that might look like.
So the question was, if I'm understanding it correctly, is just how are the interest rates going to impact? Are we going to look at the interest rates impacts on affordability? So the way I look at housing demand is long term is it's all demographics. So we occupy housing in two ways: we rent it or we purchase it, right? And so based on our demographics, we have strong demand for housing. But short term, how we consume housing, it's all about the interest rate. So we're seeing increases in renting. Our vacancy rates keep dropping. We're at 2%. So basically the rental market is at capacity. We are seeing on the for sale side, we're seeing homes sit longer. We're not seeing prices do anything dramatic yet. But to that caveat is, if we go back to so we always got to compare pre-COVID to post-COVID in a way. Days on market throughout COVID, we're at 4 to 5 days. We're back now into the two-week period where we normally are. If we looked at for sale, if we looked at the number of sales to number of active listings on utahrealestate.com, the average pre-pandemic was 2.7 new homes being put on the market to every one sold. Throughout COVID, it was 0.5, so we were significantly falling below, so we saw prices shoot up. Now we're back up to 2.7 in July. So we're seeing markets breathe. So I don't yet, we still have to see a lot of how the economy behaves the rest of the year, but housing price, we've only had 2 periods in Utah where we saw dramatic housing prices increases. It was in the 80s when we were going through all sorts of economic shifts with Kennecott and Geneva Steel shutting down and stuff like that, and throughout the great financial crisis. So every other aspect of the last 50 plus years that we have data for, we've seen positive gains. Even through the dot-com bubble, other recessions, we still see positive price gains. So yes, we take long answer short, or short answer long. We look at it, yeah.
Hey, Mike Winder, Mill Creek. Does your data, do you have some breakdown of what the owner occupied versus rental is and how that percentage is changing over time in Utah? Because obviously a lot of apartments are being built.
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is, do you see anything from the state level that we could tweak in state code to make it more desirable for developers to build owner occupied units as opposed to just rental?
I'll let Cam answer that last question. I'll say it this way: the most important day for a housing price is the day the land is entitled. Everything starts from there. To your other point about tenure, so Utah household or ownership rate is just over 70%. We always hover around 71, 70%. Utah is the only state in the nation where we've never dipped below 60% on ownership, and so we're an ownership state. That's why we've grown the way we have too. But at the time being with where land prices are, how difficult land development is in our state just because of the scarcity of it, we see more and more apartments. But we're also seeing that ownership rate kind of stay steady. There's not been much dramatic change in the ownership rate in Utah for the past 10 years.
Well, hold on. The second part 2 of the question.
Part 2, I'm going to take some arrows so that Cam doesn't have to take any.
Sorry.
What can we do to increase the rate of home ownership? Whether that be condos, townhomes, small lot homes, mobile manufactured homes in some cases. It truly is, it lies with the land use decisions that are made, of course, you all know, at the local level. It is difficult. I was a community development director. I sat in the meetings in a community that did not really enjoy additional density. A lot of the homes, when they were small lots, there are some small lots in the city that I live in, were looked at as lesser than valuable to the community. And it was unfortunate because they're still $700,000 loans. Now they only have 3-foot setbacks on the side and a 2-car garage where there's, a 22-foot driveway so that you can have your cars in the driveway and not necessarily sprawl out onto the street. But things that we've been hearing and constantly hearing are those setbacks, your density, your units per acre. Unless the cities start to work toward that, plan smartly, like our forefathers had really intentional planning. And those are the skill sets that your community development offices need to focus on. Rely on your planners to truly help you with the infill development questions, with the greenfield, brownfield. It doesn't matter. If you truly want to increase home ownership and stability in your communities, you have to be able to offer price points that are lower than the $800,000, $900,000 home. And unfortunately, along the Wasatch Front, most of the more affluent communities, that's a pretty low bar. We're talking $1 million, $2 million. The neighborhood I grew up in is astronomical. I cannot believe that the price of land and the price of homes. So all of it is on your shoulders. And it is difficult to stand in the face of your constituency, of course. But with smart planning, you can make a difference in that. Oh. Yes, Tim.
Well, first question is online, and then we'll come over.
We have a couple of questions online. Well, so first is more of a statement from Zachary Smallwood. I'm having a hard time finding data on Section 8 vouchers, and I know you're trying to wrap that into this bigger database discussion, so I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but yeah.
That'll be part of our collection. Yeah.
Yes, is the answer. We will be. It's part of our scope. It's going to be a holistic. So right now, what you can see online easily are the low-income housing tax credit funded projects. What that doesn't provide to you is the unit mix when the deed restrictions are rolling off. It doesn't provide to you the data on where the Section 8 vouchers are being utilized. A whole host of things. We really have a black hole, but we have a lot of inputs that we know as we layer them on top of each other will provide all of you and the legislature with meaningful data so that you can make strategic decisions, both funding and land use decisions.
And then another question online from Matt Brower. The 200,000 additional units needed by the end of the decade is based on what specifically? And Dan already spoke to that a little bit, but he said, I am regularly asked what the shortage numbers are actually tied to.
Yeah. So the first question is based on our population projections that were legislatively required to by the state of Utah. So we do population projections at the county level, and we just released numbers in January, I believe, that go all the way to 2060. So those numbers are based on that. And remind me of what the second question was, Carson.
The 250.
Oh, the housing shortage is based on just the imbalance between new household formations and new housing units.
Great. And then,
So pause right there. So this is actually a critical piece where all these pieces hopefully come together here within the database. So when you project between now and 2030, the number is
Roughly 2020. 220,000.
220,000. Last year, Utah cities permitted more than 40,000 housing units. So if that pace continued based on the growth in population, the gap would continue to shrink.
Yes.
Okay, so to everybody hear him say yes, it would continue to shrink. The question then becomes, will it, in light of all the economic conditions and economic factors? So Saratoga Springs, in your traditional perch in the back corner, how many, as of August 15th at 12:37 p.m., how many units do you have, you're over near your laptop, how many units do you currently have entitled for which permits have not been pulled? I love playing this game with them because they have a fancy software that you can pump these numbers out.
Well, the big number's 35,000
The big number's 35,000.
in total. There's about 10,000 in active development,
10,000 in active development.
which means they're in the entitlement process, and just shy of 2,000 active building permits, but I need to connect to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, no, I should have warned you that I was going to pick on you, but it just dawned on me while I was up here. But the point is, that's the sort of holistic data collection that we want to be able to have to drive the policy discussions, is that it's not just the 2,000 active building permits in Saratoga Springs, it's the tens of thousands of units that are entitled that then can plug into that 250,000 number and start to see where the trend lines are and where the connections are. Is that? Yeah. I keep looking over my shoulder to make sure that that's fair on the housing database side. So you had one more, and then we'll come back to Tim.
This one's more of a comment from Paul Larson. We consistently see developers leaving density on the table, building at lower densities than zoning on the parcel will allow. There's not much question there, but just if anybody wants to respond.
Well, of course, it's a price of materials. Most of the time, it's price of materials. A great example is in Draper, along the front runner. That's unlimited density, and the developers have been going 5-6 stories. The reason is because it doesn't pencil for them to go any higher. So that's typically the reason.
So both this issue that Paul brought up from Brigham City and the issue that Mike brought up about ownership from Mill Creek have come up within the UEOC. So one of the topics we've discussed has been, is there a way for the state of Utah to provide some sort of incentive or funding stream that offsets some of those material costs to allow for a switch from wood frame to steel frame and maximize the density in these strategic areas where cities have permitted for density, but because of market reasons, developers are leaving density on the table. Out of curiosity, how many of you have had the experience in your city where the city has zoned for X density, but developers have not built to X density, they've built lower? How many of you have had that experience in your cities? Raise your hands high. Okay, so about half the room have had that experience, and then quite a few online, I'm sure. Tim? Oh, it wasn't Tim. Sorry, okay, Councilmember Ivey.
Kurt Ivey, Washington City. My question has to do with inflation. We hit double-digit inflation not long ago. It's really hard to predict what those future metrics will look like, especially different regions of the state are different as well. How will that be built into the housing plan, and how do we best, in our local leadership, how do we best adjust for those, really, the unknowns? Thank you.
I'll talk about inflation. So what we're seeing, so when the rates start ticking up, when the Fed starts raising interest rates, it really hurts the new builder market. So we're already seeing that slow down. The permits that are coming in, they're slowing down. So from that perspective, in Utah, when we look at how many, just blanket statement of how many Utahns can afford the median priced household based on the interest rates and the prices, only like 30% of Utahns could actually qualify at that price. Now also 70% own a home, so they're in good shape, but it's shrunk the market, right, for home building. So the threat now is, we have some momentum. We took a giant bite out of the housing shortage, but we're also going to see probably building pull back because of these huge cost factors that are going to take a little bit to iron out.
It's one of the strengths of the legislation that requires the reporting in this year for October, is that your community gets to decide which strategies you feel like will work best in your community, and then devise implementation plans that are specific to your community and address the needs that your community has. So the different metrics that we're seeing with the inflation and the housing numbers and all of those things, they do affect each community differently. And I've taken some time over the time that I've been with the department and spoken with planners from around the state and explained to them, this is your plan. These are plans that are hopefully responsive to the needs and concerns that you have in your communities, that address a problem that's regional in scope and it's really statewide. So hopefully that flexibility allows you to create implementation plans that work well for your community.
The other thing I'll add to Bill's comment is that 462's requirements for the first time this year require a city to explain how the market's responding to your menu items. So clearly, this year with inflation, should be part of every report that we've done X, Y, and Z in Washington City, but because of inflationary challenges or material costs or supply chain shortages, here's how the market has responded to what we're doing, because that, again, gets the holistic view of how we plan for housing, we don't build housing, here's what we've done that's within our control, but there's a whole lot that's outside of our control. Christina, and then
John Miskey, or I mean John Miskey, Tim T.
Tim
I was talking to John.
Okay.
One thing
compliment, Tim.
I do want to point out, your reports are due October 1st. If there are deficiencies in the future, you will hear from us. So don't expect it to go into a black box. Historically, that's kind of what's happened. Bill will be here to work through any of the issues that we see. If there isn't measurable progress toward the implementation, whatever it may be, we're going to have a dialogue with you to try and cure the deficiency. We do have a deadline where we have to send a letter to various agencies, including UDOT, but expect that type of communication from us.
So, real quickly, and I think Cameron, you've alluded to this to an extent, does the information and the data talk about the programs that are out there to help individuals that are trying to get into the housing, down payment, closing cost assistance, things like that? Is that information part of what's being evaluated as well? Because that would be very helpful to understand how those programs are working and if there's a need to enhance funding for those programs to help individuals and communities.
So if Jim Wood were here, he would say that has always been his goal, and that is part of our database project, yes. So there's disparate information everywhere, and it's even difficult for me, and I live and breathe this, to adequately refine the resources in any given community. So yes, that will be part of it.
So, Cam, so now that I've got my data up, with 1,950 active building permits, thank heavens there's a slowdown. Thank heavens that there's a recession. I'm glad to see interest rates go up, folks. Frankly, we could use a breather. And I know that that doesn't solve the math problem that you all are trying to solve, which is what's the potential capacity. I do think it's important, and I would encourage all of you to participate in gathering your data and trying to pull it together as quickly as possible, because it is important for us. But to be totally straight, I think a recession is one of the best things that could happen for us, and let's have a couple years to slow things down and actually get it in. The reason I point that out is year to date we've added 15.4 miles of sewer line in our city. We've added 9.7 15 miles of storm drain, 9.7 miles of sewer. We could use a break. We could use some infill, and we could use some pressure off of us from the legislature. What I'm asking is a legit question. Can we have a throttle? Can we put brakes on as a city? Because right now I'm told that we have to just continue to take as many building permits as they can shove down our throats. Can we look at legislation that lets us put a cap on how fast we actually grow? Because right now the developers expect an on-demand system. They expect that our fees don't exceed our revenues. Our revenues don't exceed our revenues don't exceed our expenditures. They're asking for us to be able to predict how many building permits they're going to walk through the door and drop on our desk at any given moment. So I think we need to, if we're keeping up with the demands of the pace, that's great, but we also need to be able to say, look, you've exceeded our capacity. We can't hire enough bodies. We can't put enough people on the ground to try and keep up with these unrealistic demands for growth. And I think the door's got to swing both ways. It's a pendulum. And from a development standpoint, what they're doing with 264 and the steps they've taken over the last several years is cities, you have to grow and you have to meet these demands. With 50% of our departments understaffed, we cannot hire enough bodies, and all we're doing is stealing planners or inspectors from other cities. Whether that's a public works inspector, or whether it's a building inspector, or whether it's a planner, there's just not enough workforce, and so we've got to be able to put a brake on and say, enough is enough. Saratoga, great, you've issued your 2,000 building permits for the year, great. We need to be able to put a brake on it though, and I think that there needs to be some discussion on the high growth areas so that it gets shared a little bit, because at some point it will break the model, even though we're doing our darndest to keep up with it.
Yeah, I see all the fast growth cities that we're clapping there. So Mark, I'm going to respond to it instead of the researchers and the analysts, because they're not policymakers, but I think that is the fair point to be asking of your legislators, particularly the legislators who represent fast-growing areas, and help them recognize the 15 miles of storm drain and the 9 miles of sewer, how much that costs, and what that impact is on you as a city and on the budget. We've had some discussions within the UEOC about repurposing the State Infrastructure Bank, for example, so that the State Infrastructure Bank could potentially be used to help offset some of the costs for water and sewer infrastructure. Historically, the State Infrastructure Bank has primarily funded roads and parking garages. And so looking at it from a water and sewer perspective, particularly for fast growth areas, that's how that's come up a lot. But I think your sentiment is something that we will continue to take back to legislators. One thing we're going to talk about later in the land use task force context is that there's been a lot of back and forth this summer about the use of moratoriums and when they're appropriate, when they're inappropriate, whether you can layer them on, one moratorium after another moratorium. And obviously you in Saratoga Springs, along with the other fast-growing cities, are really at this intersection of the demand for housing and growth and the demand for quality of life and the services that come with it. So no easy answers there. Just due to time, let's do, Liam, do you have somebody else? Okay, let's do one more online, and then any final comments from the three of you.
One more question from Aileen Whitelock. Sorry, let me here scroll down. If we adopt a strategy and after working on it decide it hasn't worked, what happens?
That's a great question. I think one of the purposes of having as many strategies as there are is to try to work through which strategies are working on as broad a scale as possible. And one of the things that I'm liking about this new legislation this year is the implementation plan, so that we can see specific things that different communities are doing to implement those strategies and implement those plans in meaningful ways in their communities. And if not, why not? So the idea is that we're learning this is an iterative process, and we're learning what's going to work best in the broadest amount of areas possible, so that we can get to a place where everyone's using the same kind of toolkit. What works well in Washington City may not work well in Saratoga Springs, and vice versa. But if there are things that Saratoga Springs is doing that Washington City might learn from, well, why not? That makes sense. And if there are things that are not working, let's figure out why they're not working, and either work with the legislators to maybe revise the strategies or work with it that way. But that's the point of this, is to try to figure out what's working and why, and how to best implement things in our communities.
With all due respect, you just said, let's have the legislature mandate how we do business. I don't think that's a good plan. I don't expect a response.
No.
I'm just saying, that's what you just said, Bill, and I don't buy that.
So what 462 requires is everybody picks your own strategies, and then ideally, if strategy works in one community, then another community can look at it, but it's not a mandate. I will say that the state of California's General Assembly, and there are several other states that have gone to that micromanagement at a state level, and we have fought that off, in part because of the success to date of SB 34 and now the replacement with 462. But that'll be a fight that we'll continue to battle with developers and with legislators. So, final comments?
Yeah, final comments. Note that we're the administrators, not the policymakers. So when we deliver the information to you and we receive information, that is our role in this particular process. And respectfully, we will work with you on all iterations of the plans. Again, it hasn't been this way in the past, but that's part of our role as the department. And so we hope that it's helpful for everyone. Again, we don't make the law, we simply administrate. Any other questions?
Good. Okay.
Great.
Well,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. October 1st. October 1st is the deadline for the submission of your plans. We'll have more resources available between now and then as the database comes together, we actually are of the belief that the data will help us as cities be able to adequately and accurately tell the story of what's really happening on the local level when it comes to planning for growth and planning for housing. Justin. I guess it goes right into the chat, but I'll just,
Yeah, I'm just going to talk we're going to talk the survey first.
yep.
All right, hi. So next item on the agenda, we're going to talk about the, everyone looked at the slide like we changed anything, went back. Don't pay attention to that slide. We'll get there in a second. We're going to be talking about the survey that's going out, but I'd like to frame that a little bit. Just for your information, nobody really cares, but it's been a year since I started with the league. My first thing I ever did with the league was LPC a year ago in August. And at that point, when I met with Cam a couple of weeks before that, Cam and I had a lunch, and he came and he pulled out of his stack of papers results from a survey. And it was an LPC outcome survey, and we're getting ready to put out another one. So what that survey did, it asked about 40 questions that looked at different outcomes and what would be acceptable outcomes, what wouldn't be acceptable outcomes when we got into actually negotiating prior to and during the legislative session. That outcome survey was phenomenally helpful to us as staff, since we already had direction on many things, and we didn't have to run and ask questions when every single bill dropped. So Carson and Molly are getting ready. Looks like Carson's getting ready to talk about it, to put out another survey, and just to give you some things that are coming up on why we're putting out the survey now. We've got the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the UEOC, which we've been talking about all year long. If you're sick of us talking about it, don't worry, we're also sick of talking about it. But it's here and it's here to stay, so we're going to be dealing with it for a little while. But we expect the UEOC to come back in September with specific policy recommendations, in some cases specific actual bill language, to be considered by the UEOC. That we're going to need to start taking positions on and knowing how to interact with that. So that will include, we'll do some updates here, information on water, information on housing and growth, information on transportation. So we need to be ready to respond to that. And we also have other interim committees coming up where we expect actual proposals to be coming out. So with that in mind, we're going to be sending out this LPC policy survey, and Carson, the mastermind behind the survey, is going to give you a little preview.
There it goes. All right, so as Justin said, last year we wanted to dig a little bit deeper. As all you know, we send out a lot of piecemeal surveys. Last year we sat down, and I think it was in a brainstorming meeting with some of our friends at Wasatch Front Regional Council, and we just built a list of items and said, we really don't know where our members feel about all of these relative to each other, right? We knew that many of these policy items were moving down the legislative track. We knew we only had limited bandwidth, and we needed to figure out how we were going to prioritize our legislative advocacy around them, how we can build a framework. And so we put together probably one of the biggest surveys I've done at the league. And so like Justin said, we had about 120 total responses, most of which were from cities. We shared it with counties too to see if we could get some feedback. There was 44 policy topics involved, which was a comprehensive survey, and I cannot express my appreciation enough for all of you having taken that time. This year we're trying to break that out into some smaller bites and kind of build some momentum, so we're not sending you quite as many surveys. I'm not going to ask everybody to raise their hands and tell me how tired they are of filling out surveys from the league, but I appreciate that you and your staff are taking the time to do it. So this year we started by asking a quick poll question at mid-year. Many of you might remember, just asking you to rate these 8 topics by order of what level, or by order of importance, what level should the state be involved in them. And we got great feedback from that. Then we unveiled the spring priorities survey, and we've used that to build our interim engagement list. So when you said transportation and housing are some of our top priorities, more so than maybe public safety funding, we said, okay, that's where we're going to put resources. So next comes the big survey, and that's the outcome survey. And we were hoping to have an actual survey available for you today. Unfortunately, some of those topics are still pretty nebulous, and I don't think any of us know exactly where the dice are going to roll. So we want to make sure we have, we're actually asking the right questions. So again, we'll probably have hopefully it'll be less long than the last year's survey, but probably still fairly long. We'll be distributing it out through the LPC list. We'll be asking you about a pretty wide range of housing issues, of transportation issues. Again, trying to get your feedback, making sure that we know where to put resources, making sure we know how concerned you are about different items, and trying to see if there's some area of consensus between the policy committee, league members, the board, and then state policymakers. So that'll be the goal. I don't have any specific questions to focus group yet, but I'm just thanking you in advance for taking the time. We'll probably be bothering you probably next week or maybe early the week after that. So thanks.
So I joked with Carson we were going to do a slide, and I didn't get around to make it with Carson's really sad face on there. Big puppy dog eyes if you don't take the survey. So I may have to get that slide ready and send it out. But I really cannot reiterate enough how important this survey is to us. If you ignore all of our surveys that we've already sent out this year, that was lame, don't do that. But if you've ignored all of our surveys to this point, please take this survey. This really does inform how we engage with the legislature for the next six and a half months until the legislative session is over, which is about 6.5 months away. Not that I count my entire year around that. But please take that survey. It is very helpful. And if you've changed your mind on something from last year, that's also why we take this survey. If things have changed, we know inflation has changed things. We know a lot of things are different. So please take the survey. If you don't listen to anything else we say today, take that survey when it comes out. So with that, one of the issues we do know that's coming up is short-term rentals. So Carson, don't go too far away because we need to talk about.
Do you want to do CHA first, or do you want me to jump into?
Oh yeah, do you want to start with CHA? I think we're gonna.
Or do you want to put that at the end?
Just do CHA.
Yeah, let's just do short-term rentals because I think that's, in the interest of time, we'll talk short-term rentals. So that should be up there.
Sweet.
So go for it, Carson.
Hopefully everybody can see that. Let's see. Great. So we know, like Justin said, we know short-term rentals is going to be a major issue. There were 3 bills last year, 3 proposed bills that would have changed your ability to regulate short-term rentals in some fashion. Those bills all came out in the last week and a half of the session. Legislators who were even friendly towards our position didn't think that was enough time to really have a good discussion around them. So they postponed them. Representative Musselman agreed to take it on as an interim issue, and he's convened a work group to try to start hashing through some policy items. Meanwhile, we brought back our short-term rental internal working group from last year. Some of you are on it, and I appreciate all the time that you've spent reading through resolution drafts, reading through all the studies I've sent you, and all your time in meetings. So we'll continue that working group. Feel free to reach out to me if you aren't involved and would like to be, and I'll get you added. So this resolution kind of came from that group. It came from the feedback that we'd received. There's a few different. Short-term rentals is tricky because there's different impacts in every community. In some communities, you might have a huge portion of your housing stock consumed by short-term rentals. In some communities, you might have party houses that are disrupting neighbors frequently. In some communities, you might have tour buses parking in the middle of your road and blocking it for residents. It's tricky to encapsulate all of these, but we did our best in this resolution. So we try to touch on that aspect. We try to touch on housing. I'm not going to read it line by line, but you should all have a copy of it. If you go to ulct.org/resolutions 2022-001, you can find it there as well. We're not going to ask you to vote on this resolution today, but we kind of want to have some high-level feedback and make sure we're going in the right direction. So let's see. I'm going to skip down the whereas clauses because those kind of restate what we already know. There's a lot of short-term rentals. They're growing at a fast pace. They disrupt neighborhoods, and cities need a different flexibility to regulate their different needs. Let's see. So skimming down here, and this is kind of a bigger strategic policy discussion, but what I want to ask you to think about today, right now we have kind of a vague list of asks for various policymakers at the state and the tax commission. We want to know if it's best to bring to you, if it's best to take a position on some kind of general framework concepts like we have listed here, if it's best to have specific asks. We have some political calculations. We've been meeting with Representative Musselman. We're not exactly sure where he wants to go, but that's kind of the conversation we want to have. Is it best to leave it kind of right now with the framework of local control? Are there specific things that we should be addressing? I know this is hitting some of you cold, so you don't have to answer on the spot, but I can kind of open it up to conversation. I'll pull it up so you can actually read what it says.
Carson, where might might we find this online for those of us that don't want to squint at the screen? I'm not seeing it on the resolutions part of the league's website.
Yeah, correct. So if you go to ulct.org/2022-001, sorry, I was hoping there would be an email that would be reaching you with this link, but I'm not sure if that's gone out yet. So if you go, yeah, let me just type it here so everybody can. So if you go here, you'll be able to pull up the draft document and you can kind of read over it. For folks online, I'll drop that in the chat box.
And Carson, I'll just note, we're really giving the preview today. We don't need to vote on this. We don't need to take a position on this. The work group's going to keep working through it. So if you have any quick comments, great, or specific comments, but we will be bringing this back next month, just so you're aware procedurally, to vote on it and take a position. So if you can't find it right now, it will be out in the email and you can read it later as well.
Well, the optimist in me is just hoping that everybody's quickly reading it and feeling like it's really good and you don't need to provide any additional feedback, but I'm sure there'll be additional comments. I don't want to hold up the agenda for too long, so maybe if you just want to circle back with me afterwards, if you want to reach out to me later, and we can, I'm happy, we're still kind of in the conceptual phase, but we can start getting into specific language if there's wording that concerns you. Again, we'll be meeting with our short-term rental group again before we get back to LPC for some sort of final changes there, and then the resolution, if the LPC endorses it, it'll go before the general membership during the business session at the annual conference, where you will all get another chance, you'll all get another chance to vote on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Now that by the way, for those online, Kate Bradshaw Bountiful, now that I found it and I'm reading the therefore be it resolves, I would love to see an additional be it resolved that state lawmakers allow cities to use enforcement tools that are the most effective and cost efficient. I see that in number one you have should reduce or remove rental restrictions so local governments can determine the policies that fit best. But I would suggest that adding an additional number point about using cost-effective and efficient means in order to determine those local policies makes sense, because that is the crux of what they have not allowed in using online advertising. And as one of my friends from another city mentioned, it's like needing to look up a phone number but not being able to use the phone book. And so I think we've reached a level of ridiculousness in the hoops staffs must jump through in being inefficient.
Gotcha. So be a little bit more poignant in asking for that. Thanks. All right. Well, again, thanks for your time, and we'll make sure that if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, you do have a chance to read it before next LPC, and then we'll be asking you to vote on it, whether it should go before the general membership. So, if there's any other questions, feel free to grab me afterwards or email me. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you, Carson. So we'll have the resolution on short-term rentals for you to vote on in the September meeting. We've got the survey that's coming later this month, and over the next few minutes, we're going to hit you with a rapid-fire overview of all of the different policy ideas that are currently being debated within the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission or at the legislature. Basically, every point we bring up now will be part of that survey. So this is your chance to say, hey, help clarify this for me, or what are they trying to accomplish here? And then we'll be building that survey to get the feedback from the LPC generally to be able to take back to the league board in September and back to this body, because between now and the end of September is when the UEOC is going to be formulating the actual proposals. Mayor Ramsey represents the league on the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, on the main commission. And then within the subgroups, I'm on a subgroup, Justin's on a subgroup, Kaysville Mayor Tammy Tran's on a subgroup, Conrad Heights Council Member Sean Newell's on a subgroup. Oh, yeah, you could do that too. Spanish Fork Mayor Mike Mendenhall is on a subgroup. South Ogden City Manager Matt Dixon's on a subgroup. I should have brought the list up so I didn't forget anybody. But my point is, we were successful. Councilmember Tyson Roberts from Layton, Mayor Randall from St. George. I'll stop there. But the point is, we were able to get city people on every one of the subgroups. The Commission on Housing Affordability is now an official subgroup of the UEOC. And Orem Councilmember Tom McDonald, Salt Lake City Homeless Policy Director Andrew Johnston are the two league reps on the CHA. And then Danny Waltz, who runs the RDA for Salt Lake City and is the president of the RDA Association, represents RDAs on the CHA. So those are our three local voices on the CHA, in addition to all of the other UEOC groups. Within the CHA, there are three subgroups. These are the members of the overall CHA who are then part of the subgroup. These are the topics they're looking at. Now, these slides are direct to you from the UEOC meeting last week. Okay, so this is what was presented to them last week, and the subgroups are still going to be meeting over the next few weeks. Then there's the low income subgroup. That's 80% area median income and below, and that's actually been divided into two subgroups. We do have a massive flow chart at the office where we track all the different subgroups, so we'll just take my word for it for now. Andrew Johnston is our league rep on this low income subgroup. You can see that they're looking at a funding request for permanent supportive housing, potentially increasing the cap on the Olene Walker Fund projects, and then also trying to develop a variety of true low income affordable housing projects. Then you have what has been termed the attainable subgroup, and this is the subgroup that continues to focus on local land use planning and local governments. It's co-chaired by our rep, Orem Councilmember Tom McDonald, as well as Chris Gambroulis from Ivory Homes, and you can see the other names on there. Those are just the official CHA members who are then part of the subgroup. I attend these meetings regularly, as does Mayor Silvestrini, the first vice president of the league. So the areas that they're considering are still very much at a high level, which is why we don't have a resolution or new resolution for you, and we're not ready to even put these into a survey form yet, because they're still fairly nebulous. But they range from strategies for a variety of housing types, which is essentially the crux of 462, removing development barriers, funding opportunities, short-term rentals, and compliance with moderate income housing plans. In addition to these, we've also brought up other topics, like I mentioned before, that fits into the development barrier piece, but the wood to steel, or repurposing the state infrastructure bank to help with infrastructure. So that's where things are at within the CHA. The next CHA meeting, Commission on Housing Affordability, next full meeting will be September 13th. That's why we've moved LPC up in September from its previously scheduled time of September 19th to Monday, September 12th. That way, this body has a chance to get updated on what's coming to the full CHA on the 13th and be able to provide feedback to Councilmember McDonald, to Andrew Johnston, and Danny Waltz before they have the full CHA meeting on the 13th. Then after the CHA meeting on the 13th, everything goes to the UEOC the last week in September, and Mayor Ramsey represents us there. Clear as mud? So let me pause there before I move on to the next UEOC subgroup to see if there are any questions about anything that is circulating within the Commission on Housing Affordability. Okay. I anticipate in the next week or two there'll be a little more meat on the bones from the concepts, both the things that we've put forward as well as what the development community has put forward. Met with Senator Lincoln Fillmore, who's the new co-chair of the CHA last week, and I asked him what was on his mind and what he wanted to make sure to accomplish from the CHA, and his response was, I just want to see the development community and local governments bring me consensus recommendations. And my response was, oh, is that all? So again, a lot of moving parts between now and there. On the short-term rental piece, Representative Musselman is running that independent of the CHA, but we continue to bring it up within the CHA. So the resolution that Carson shared with you, that came from our short-term rental work group. And then Sean Guzman and I are on Representative Musselman's work group, where we're advocating for those changes in his potential legislation. We're trying to tie these pieces back together. Part of the political strategy for us running the resolution is that Governor Cox has indicated to us that he's supportive of making changes in the short-term rental space. So having a resolution that says we as a league care about making changes to short-term rentals regulation, this isn't just a Springdale issue, this isn't just a Moab issue, and will carry a lot of weight with the governor. So then you may ask, well, why aren't there other resolutions on other land use and housing policies? And I'm glad you didn't ask, but we're thinking about it. Because you as the members 4 years ago endorsed a resolution on land use and housing. We as staff actually went through it and felt like all of the main points from that 5-page resolution 4 years ago are still relevant today. So there's no need to make any changes to that resolution. That resolution was silent on short-term rentals. Hence, the short-term rental resolution is a companion to that housing and land use resolution. I'm not sure if I'm getting blank stares or if it's the burrito, the aftermath of the burritos, but all right, let's move on to the next UEOC subgroup, and this is on growth and transportation. Mayor Ramsey, Spanish Fork Mayor Mike Mendenhall, and I represent the league on this subgroup. And surprise, surprise, there are 4 subgroups on this subgroup. And there's the Regional Growth Alignment Group, and the effort here is to evaluate state programs and see where there's disconnect, or better put, where there are opportunities to better connect and align the programs. So for example, the legislature last year overhauled how the state provides EdTIF grants to businesses that are looking to relocate or expand programming in Utah. So there's a set of policy criteria around EdTIF. Well, there's also a set of policy criteria around how the state invests transportation dollars. Are they aligned? Is the state policy around economic development, state policy around transportation, state policy around water, are those aligned or not? So that's been the effort to look into those types of state programs. The second group is on infrastructure investment. This is that state infrastructure bank concept I've brought up several times. I think it's also important to note that one of the topics that's come up in this subgroup is around PIDs, public infrastructure districts, and whether or not that's a useful tool that should be expanded at state level. In the transportation funding subgroup, this is one that has several options on it. In fact, I don't see Scott Darrington in his normal spot, so I'm going to assume Scott's online. But we've talked about transportation utility fee in that context, but we've also talked about everything from property tax to sales tax and other revenue streams to pay for local and state transportation. Still a lot of moving pieces there, but I feel really good about where that group is going for now. And then the last piece is value capture. And this has shifted depending on the meeting you're in. We've had 3 meetings on this concept, and it's taken on a different form in each of those 3 meetings. So that's all I'm going to say for now, because we have another meeting about it tomorrow, and my hunch is it'll morph again. We've been meeting with some of our TIF experts to try to figure out why cities currently don't use the Transportation Reinvestment Zone tool, the TRZ, while we have several cities that have either now implemented or are looking at the HTRZ tool. So why yes on HTRZ, why no on TRZ, and are there ways that we can improve the TRZ tool and get more state participation in the TRZ tool? Because that's the one piece that's missing there. So I'm going to pause here before I turn over to the next UEOC subgroup to see if there are any clarifying questions about any of these topics, recognizing they will all be part of the holistic survey that will go out later this month. Wow. Okay. Last thing I'll mention about that survey, Justin referenced it. I walked around with those survey results. I mean, I felt like I was a missionary again, walking around with Holy Writ, because every meeting I'd have with legislators, they'd say, well, what about this idea? And I'd pull out the survey results. Actually, our members were adamantly opposed to X, Y, and Z. And they'd say, okay, well, if your members are that opposed to it, what can they support? Well, they could support these things. And then we did a report card for the league board where we showed that we were at tremendous success in the areas where we could support, tremendous success holding back the things that we hated, and then that area in kind of that middle zone, we made really good progress in the middle zone while still respecting the roles of local government. So that's what we want to emulate again. So with that, Justin, I'll turn it back to you and the rest of the team to finish the rest of the UEOC stuff. Mayor Kafusi, I'm cautiously optimistic that we will only go maybe 5 minutes over. Okay.
All right, before, next we're going to talk about the government efficiency one. And Councilmember Newell, you've been serving on that committee. Would you be okay coming up to give us a quick update of what's been going on in government efficiency on the UEOC? Or just any thoughts you have about the UEOC in general? I know we talk about it a lot, so this is your chance to hear from someone who's been in the room.
Not a lot to report.
I know, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah, we don't have a lot to report right now, but we've had a couple of opportunities to meet. The biggest task for us is to go into a number of different state entities and try to find out where the dysfunction is and the inefficiencies. And then we've created these subgroups within our subgroup that are actually going out and talking to business and industry. And hopefully we can get some feedback from you as municipalities as to what barriers you see. So please reach out to me, help me out. That'll help me with the work I'm doing, and I can be the A student in the class. But I want to make sure that you know that this is something that's really critical for us. If we're seeing barriers that are stopping us from doing the things that we're supposed to do, that we're charged with doing, those are the things that we're looking at. We're trying to be as efficient as possible as a state, and part of our subgroup's responsibility is finding out what areas these barriers exist in. So I look forward to you helping us out, and as we move forward, we'll have more information to share with you, I hope. Great, thanks.
Hi everyone, Molly Wheeler, Policy Director. I wanted to give you an update on one thing that we are hoping ideally we can be running through the UEOC Government Efficiency Committee, and if not, we'll be pursuing some other avenues of looking at how to potentially get some state support. So we are learning about emerging needs in our smaller cities and towns for additional administrative support. A lot of our small towns and cities, they have their council, they have their mayor, and they have their recorder or clerk, but they don't really have a lot of other administrative support, and that is weighing down on their administrative functioning. And so we are looking at creating a rotating city manager program, which would essentially provide proactive administrative support on an ad hoc basis. So a city or town who doesn't have a city manager could contract to maybe have someone come in a couple hours a week, or to help them with a specific project, like we need to update our water rate structure, or really it's flexible as to what it could do, right? We're hoping that we can make sure that our ordinances are following best practices, that cities and towns are aligned with state code, and again, helping with grant applications, facilitate with technical assistance, anything like that. We've had a lot of interest in this so far. The governor is interested, DWS, UCMA, and we've had a chance to meet with a couple AOGs throughout the state as well. So moving forward, we are working to really determine the scope of need and interest. So getting a list of who does and who does not have a city manager. Of those who do not, what is their interest? Would they be interested in participating in a pilot program? What types of assistance would they need? How often would they like assistance? And then trying to build out some of the functional policy elements. Would this be one core person who is maybe housed at the league? Would we have various folks housed at different AOGs throughout the state? Really thinking through how that would look and how that would actually be implemented. And we're meeting with the AOGs next week to flesh this out a little bit more. So my ask to you all would be, if you either are a city manager or are a city or a town without a city manager and are interested in this, please reach out and let us know so we can make sure that this is a functional policy that works for city managers, that works for our smaller cities and towns, to make sure everyone's getting the support they need.
All All right, Cam thought he was done, but he forgot I assigned him more stuff to talk about. So have Cam come up and talk about land use task force. Todd, you're probably on the hook to talk about some of this too, so get ready.
Yep, come on up, Todd. Okay, so within the land use task force, we have 4 more subgroups, but the development standards piece, Sean Guzman has been our point person on this one, and this dovetails into discussions at the Commission on Housing Affordability. Todd, I'll give you a second to give an update on where things are at on the discussion around moratoriums.
Moratoriums have been put on the table by the Property Rights Coalition. They are experiencing what they characterize as some abuses in the use of moratoriums, stacking that goes longer than the moratorium period, justifications that don't meet the legal standard, some of those things. So we're talking to them about potential amendments to that section. Before anybody gets too concerned, I want you to know we understand very well and we see a clear distinction between those situations where we have an inability to provide a significant utility, a critical service, as opposed to those circumstances where we may feel like our ordinances are out of date, or we may feel like our general plan is not the way we want to envision our community at a particular point. Those are separate and kind of distinct issues in my mind, and it creates an intersection that's difficult to navigate. But I think it's important that you understand that's on the table. I take question calls from all over the state on behalf of the league, legal questions from different small communities everywhere. I think I've had 20 questions in the last 3 months that come to me and say, do we have to keep taking applications for development when we don't have any water? So those are things that are on the front of our minds. We understand the issues you're facing, and as we talk about those things, we're not going to forget those.
Perfect, thank you, Todd. For those who may not be aware, as Todd mentioned, Todd contracts with the league, his firm contracts with the league to provide that legal Q&A service, and then also provide us with the land use expertise with the land use task force and beyond. So Todd, thank you for all the time that you dedicate to the league, and thank you for answering all my phone calls during the session as we've worked through countless bills over the last couple of years. Okay, good. Carson, you got to Scott. Perfect. On the development standards piece, Mark Johnson, I wanted to thank you for sharing Taylor Nielsen with this group. We've heard from the Property Rights Coalition for years their frustration on development standards, and the way we structure the Land Use Task Force is we mainly have attorneys with a couple of planners meeting with the Property Rights Coalition and hash out lots of land use issues during the off-season. Well, when they were bringing this issue forward to us last year, we realized, we being Todd and Gary Crane and Lynn Pace and Ryan Luce and Sean Guzman and the other members of our negotiating team, that we didn't have the right people in the room for the conversation around development standards. So we reached out to the City Engineers Association. That's how I actually never met Taylor before, but he's been in leadership, works for Ogden City, but he's in leadership of the City Engineers Association. And he's been really great at helping connect the dots with other city engineers so we can have this conversation in a consensus building way. There are still attorneys in the room. Sean's our point person, but having Taylor and some of Taylor's colleagues from other cities has been really helpful. So thank you to Ogden City for that. Ryan, is there anything you want to report on conversation on development agreements? If there's anything worth reporting, you can. If not, I'm watching the clock for Mayor Kafusi's sake.
It's mainly a problem with 2 counties that are requiring development agreements to get around. Was it HB 98, Ray's design standards bill? And so we're trying to solve it without creating big problems for those of us, mainly the cities, who use agreements in the way the developer may convene with. And the cities agree should be used. So it's not a city problem, but we're fixing it.
Perfect. And then the last item right now before the Land Use Task Force is annexation and incorporation. And I know there was quite a bit of interest when we brought this up in June. Each of these have had different city people who have volunteered to be in work groups to provide feedback to our point people on it. This is one that the more we dug into it, the more we realized we really needed more of a full-scale rewrite rather than just picking off pieces here and there. So we're in discussions with the Utah Land Use Institute to potentially fund a full rewrite while still fixing a couple of critical pieces that need to be fixed now around the definition of rural property. So Will Summercorn, many of you know Will sitting in the back, he put together a proposal on behalf of the ULUI, shared it with the league and with the Property Rights Coalition to take a bigger crack at, the original proposal was just annexation, right? We're going to look at that one first. Okay. So any questions on any of these 4 topics? Okay, so again, there's nothing yet to vote on, but we wanted to give you an update on all the moving pieces and let you know who's involved with them. My last items within land use, the board was chatting this morning about the next steps on House Bill 440. Wayne Niederhauser is working on a proposal around permanent supportive housing, where he would like the league and cities to be a partner with his office on that. That's independent of what needs to happen in the short term in Salt Lake County over the next few weeks. So stay tuned for more information. Molly and I met with him last week and saw his proposal for the first time, and he acknowledged it was still at a high level and he's working out the details. But this would be to try to facilitate more permanent supportive housing, which is housing for individuals who have services available to them on site. So it's not a homeless resource center, but it's also not, I'm living in my apartment and I go somewhere else for services. It's ideally services wrapped around housing, which should have a lower impact on public safety than a traditional homeless resource center. We mentioned short-term rentals. Public assets, the board talked about this morning as well. We are anticipating legislation around requiring all public entities to inventory publicly owned real estate. So stay tuned for that. We're working closely with Scott Anderson of Zions Bank. This is a top priority for him personally. So we're working closely with him to try to craft what this should look like. Moab City, I don't know if Carly's on or not, their city manager. Can you just check to see if she is? If not, the gist of it is they passed an ordinance last week that requires new development in the city in certain zones to set aside units for individuals who work in Grand or San Juan counties, not for Grand or San Juan counties, but work in the counties. So if you recall, last year we spent a lot of time working through inclusionary housing, the idea that any new development would be required to set aside units for affordable, at affordable prices. This is different. What Moab is trying to do is address the fact that anytime there's a new housing unit built in Moab City, it almost immediately gets gobbled up into becoming a vacation rental, and there's no housing for people who are trying to work in the area. There's been a lot of pushback from the Property Rights Coalition. There's been some pushback from legislators. So this is something that we likely will need to discuss as a league. Today is not that day. They just passed the ordinance last week. I'm waiting for Carly to get back to us with the white paper of exactly what they've finalized in the ordinance. This also is where it dovetails with short-term rentals, though. Carson referenced the research we did with Gardner Policy Institute that hopefully you all saw on Friday Facts a few weeks ago. But Gardner Policy Institute, in fact, it was Dehan who did it, more than 19,000 short-term rental units that are available online right now in the state of Utah, and that number's gone up 26% just in the last couple of years. We then broke it down city by city based on Dehan's analysis. So Carson found, for example, in Moab City, that they had 20 new housing units constructed in the city last year, but they saw 40 new vacation rentals come online last year. So law school, not math school, but you can see how the math is backwards there, that they're losing units year over year because of the pressures of short-term rentals. And we're going through that data and making sure that's front and center as part of the short-term rental discussions. On the other states, Florida, Colorado, Texas, California, every time I turn around, I'm getting bills sent to me from other states. Florida just passed a bill that would take the shot clocks. We have some development shot clocks in our code, but take development shot clocks and actually require a refund of development fees for every day that a city misses the shot clock. I heard about that from the state of Florida, and within days I heard about that from a legislator. Colorado is working on some interesting transportation funding ideas that we're bringing forward to legislators, and then cities might as well not exist anymore in Texas and California, but that's a different story for a different day. Carson, you're done. Justin, I'll let you wrap it up from here. So that clock's fast. That one, we still have a couple more minutes.
Cam said shot clock. I'm going to give myself a 90-second shot clock to run through everything else here. The quick thing I'll say is last time we met, we asked for a lot of volunteers help us out on various working groups. And when we did that, I said, we may call you, we may not, depending on what happens. As far as I can tell, the summer was everybody going on vacation and then everybody getting COVID after going on vacation. So there's been a lot of things not happening on several issues. While there's been plenty that we've been working on, several things that we asked for help on, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement on yet. But things that we do expect to see movement on in the near future, we expect to see movement on gravel pits. Senator Sandel has told me he'll have a bill on gravel pits. The language should be public within the next few weeks. So we'll have something very specific to talk about there. There's going to be plenty to talk about with water conservation in the Great Salt Lake. There we go. This is the last UEOC update. There is the Committee on Water Infrastructure and Environment Priorities. I'm going to jump over most of this, and I didn't design this slide, this is their slide. But under turf buyback legislation, and I know this doesn't make sense, again, their slide, they did talk quite a bit about secondary water metering. I know many of you have applied for grants for secondary water metering. They have pushed out one of the biggest, about $190 million has gone out the door, just approved last week on secondary waters. We know that a lot of people that applied for the grant ran into an issue because there's the cap. At $5 or $10 million that you can apply for. They're looking at doing something with the cap over this next section. So even if you've already applied for money, there may be additional funds available depending where that goes. If you have not yet applied for those funds and you are eligible for that, they may be opening up another round of that, but they've already opened up 2 rounds and kicked out most of the money. Other working groups, again, that are coming up, if you signed up for these, we'll probably have work for you to do very soon, including Water Council member. We are looking at elected official vacancies in 20A. We're looking at public safety. For those who signed up on Justice Courts, Roger and I are going to get you together pretty soon to give you an update on where that is. Looking at other things, governmental immunity, retirement compensation, a whole host of things we have to talk about. Last thing I'll say on this one, Cam mentioned this earlier. Have you met with your representatives and you told them what's going on in your city recently? The numbers like you gave Mark, all the lines of, sewer lines and everything else you put out there, these are things that are great for us to hear. These are things for even better for your legislators to hear. So please, if you have not, reach out to your legislators. I know a lot of you do a phenomenal job at that. If you haven't talked to your legislators recently, please reach out to them, let them know what's working well, what isn't working, so that they can hear that from you. And also, as we always remind you, it is great to reach out to your legislator during the legislative session, but they get really, really busy during the session. So your chance of getting them during the session and having them listen to you goes up exponentially if you've reached out to them before the session, and they know who you are when you reach out at that time. So please reach out to your legislators. Mayor, I don't know if you want to come up and finish this off? But the one note we'll have here, we did again change LPC to September 12th. That's in 4 weeks instead of the 19th where it would have been. But Meryl, kick it back to you.
Great. So our annual convention will be October 5th through the 7th. And if you haven't been inundated with reminders, here it is again. Also, the schedule for our LPC meetings. Are we going to send this out again? I know it was on Friday Facts, but we'll send it again. Yep, we will. Perfect. Just because we made that little change in board meeting today. So that's basically all we have. I just want to thank all those that presented today, all those that commented. I often tell my staff, if you don't speak up and tell me what I'm doing wrong or what we need to fix, it's a worthless meeting. So I appreciate everybody speaking up and giving your feedback and input. Oh, there's more. Wow, this is a lot.
You can just look at it.
Yeah, so everyone take a look at key dates. There's a lot going on from August 15th all the way down to November 8th. We'll send out reminders as well in our Friday Facts, so keep your eye on that. But is that everything, Cam?
You just mentioned the reminder for the 22nd and 29th.
The 22nd and the 29th. Okay, the mayor's at the mansion, what Mayor Ramsey mentioned, on August 22nd, and August 29th is the Davis County Mayors with legislative leadership. So those are 2 dates that are coming up really quick. Other than that, it's time for the favorite motion. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. We have multiple. Did you get one of those?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming. Drive home safely.